Hi, I'm Ross Atkins. Thanks for joining me on World Have Your Say. Many of you have now seen this horrific picture of a fetus which was aborted 7 months into the pregnancy of a Chinese woman. Now, she's received an apology and no one is suggesting it should have happened. But you are discussing whether the furore around this image may lead to a change in China's one-child policy, or if not that, the way that it's implemented at least. And we're also going to turn our attention to that now infamous text message from the Spanish Prime Minister to his Finance Minister. He said Spain is not Uganda. Well, evidently, on one level, he's right, but that hasn't stopped thousands of you reacting to that. We're live for the whole hour here on BBC World News. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Well, let's begin by talking about this shocking photo of a fetus that was aborted during the 7th month of a pregnancy of a woman in China. The first three guests we can speak to about this are Chai Ling, founder of the group All Girls Allowed, which campaigns against forced abortions in China, and she has spoken to the woman concerned. Her husband took the photo. Yash Wei is a Chinese-American, live with us from Washington, D.C., and Eric Fish is editor of the Sina Stand blog. He's an American living in Beijing. All three of you, thank you very much indeed for joining me. Yash Wei in Washington, perhaps I could start with you. How did you react when you saw this photo?
Well, it came as no surprise. And it's been implemented forcibly and brutally for 30 years, and mostly in rural areas. And the reason this particular incident caught public attention and caused the outcry is due to largely due to the power of Weibo.
But Chai Ling, let's bring you in. The officials concerned have been suspended. The authorities have apologized to this woman. So can we draw broader points about the one-child policy from this particular case?
Yes, I spoke to the victim's family shortly after I got a hold of this information. I learned the brutal nature of how this was being implemented. This woman was 7 months pregnant, was at her home, and was dragged out by several strong men, was held down by 5 strong men in the hospital. They had a pillowcase over her, and they pressed her finger on the ink and the consent form. After that, they the doctor put a long needle into her tummy, into her baby's head, and that needle contains poison. And after that, the baby was poisoned to death. And 2 days later, after painful contraction, it came out.
But Chai Ling, let me interrupt you here, because I acknowledged when I asked you the question that the people involved in this have been suspended. The authorities have said it's not acceptable. Hardly anyone is suggesting this is acceptable. But can we draw broader criticism of how the Chinese authorities are behaving from this one incident?
Well, first of all, this is the first time we saw the Chinese leaders have apologized for this kind of incident. As Yoshi has said earlier, this has been going on for 30 years. This incident was no two reasons. One, the story come out, and with a powerful picture and the Weibo, the power of the new technology. But this has been going for past 30 plus years. And we welcome the government's gesture that to apologize and reprimand, punish those ones who implement this brutal torture on the family and murder against this innocent baby. We ask for more. This is the year to end this brutal one-child policy. I do want to show you, this is not one incident. This was done by.
Chai Ling, hold on a moment on that. We can't have you holding up. We can't have you holding up images without us knowing what you're going to hold up in advance, because of course we need to make sure what we're showing our viewers. But before I bring Eric in to talk about this as well, and it's worth saying that at no point have Chinese officials admitted that it is a regular occurrence for a fetus in the 7th month of pregnancy to be aborted. Before I bring you in, Eric, let me pull up this message from Jane in Australia, who's posted on Facebook. This is horrendous and very tragic. How civilized are the people involved with such brutality? Unbelievable, she says. Well, Eric, you're in Beijing. I wonder what reaction you've heard from people there.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much everyone's horrified by the images. So yeah, everybody's shocked. I don't think was shocked by the images, but like Yashway said, this isn't really surprising. This kind of thing has been going on, and probably the big difference here is that people have been kind of slapped in the face with this vivid image. But yeah, the one-child policy has never been popular, but I think overall Chinese dislike it because just the fact that they can't have more than one child. But I think this has kind of shown, well, there's these other horrible social side effects that are coming along with it. And it's not just that people can't have one child. And if you look at the microblogs, a lot of people were very surprised. They've never quite seen anything like this. So I think this has just really brought kind of the issues that most people don't see when they think of the one-child policy to the forefront.
Yashway, do you think that the one-child policy needs to be altered?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's no question about that. The question is how likely it will be altered. And my answer is pretty much a no, because it's deeply embedded in the system. And local officials, their promotion is tied to their family population control performance.
But Yashway, do you not acknowledge there are some benefits to the one-child policy? Do you think that China's economic growth would be possible if your population was increasing at a far faster rate?
It is. Nobody argued that. There's a famous economist in 1960s promoted population control to Chairman Mao and was rejected. But that's not the question. The question is how to humanely implement a policy like that. And the way it is now, it's we can't really call it a family planning. We have to call it a forced, brutal family planning. It's pretty typical of the Chinese version of totalitarianism, in which human individuals, families are always the means, not the end.
Well, Chai-Ling and Yashway, you're both in your different ways making the case to change China's one-child policy. I wonder, those of you watching BBC World News, whether you're Chinese or not, are you persuaded, or do you think there are benefits? It's just that in this case, the policy was completely wrongly enforced. You're very welcome to call us up, country code 44 2070 83 72 72. I'll take a look at some more of what you're posting online in a moment as well. But first of all, this is what Ms. Wang in Beijing thinks about the photo.
Feng having a second baby is not against the regulations of this country. It's just that she didn't have enough money to look after a second child. The case is awful in terms of protecting women.
And Taodag in Shanghai posts on the social network Weibo, enforced abortion is done at the instruction of government leaders, not laws. If the victim wants to go to court, the case would not be taken up. And Chai-Ling, live with us from the States, what about what the woman in Beijing said, which is that you have to think about whether you have the money to bring up a second child before you even consider having it?
You know, it's really the family's responsibility. They are determined and willing to bring up their children, whatever it takes. And one-child policy has been so brutally enforced. It really created this massive privileged class. More than 800,000 people are involved and benefiting from the fines, from this brutality. The pictures I want to show you is all listed on All Girls Allowed. We are the organization dedicated to expose the brutality of the one-child policy, to restore God-given life, value, dignity to women and mothers.
But Chai-Ling, no one is suggesting that the dignity of women should be undermined, or certainly no one contacting World Have Your Say. But isn't there an argument that everyone benefits from China's economic growth, but that economic growth is only possible if quite strict policies are pursued, including the one-child policy?
Absolutely not. What is happening in China is a Holocaust against babies and mothers. Every day, there are over 500 women commit suicide as a result of this kind of brutality. This Feng Jianmei woman, who after this forceful brutality imposed on her and her baby, she wanted to kill herself. And this is not acceptable. And the whole theory that with China's limited population growth, the whole world will benefit, is firstly, is factually wrong. Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, they all had a great economic growth with no family planning policy imposed.
Okay, well, that's an interesting point. You say there's no connection between this one-child policy and China's economic growth. Those of you watching, do you agree that some people who suggest there is are getting it wrong? You can post on facebook.com/worldhaveyoursay. We're also using the hashtag WHYS. Chailan, just hold on a moment. I want to bring in some other thoughts on this, and it's worth saying that while the Chinese authorities have apologized to the woman in this case, they've suspended officials. They also say they're launching an investigation, but they haven't confirmed the circumstances in which this abortion took place, or the circumstances in which the woman reached the hospital. We'll have to wait for their side of that particular story. Let's put up this message from Li Wang, posting on bbcchinese.com. A 7-month baby is killed. The mother is forced to have an abortion. The world is shocked, but it's quite normal in China. And Eric, let me bring you in. You're live with us from Beijing. The law in China states that babies with fetuses within 6 months of the pregnancy can be aborted to avoid a second child. In your experience, is that policy widely supported?
Well, it's really hard to say. I mean, local officials are really in charge of this, and how often that's broken, how often it's enforced, it's really impossible for us to say. A lot of information about that is considered a state secret in China, so it is very hard to say. Just as a hunch, a lot of times that is broken explicitly in order to enforce the one-child policy. In March, there was a very similar incident that didn't quite take off the way this was, where a 9-month-old baby was aborted and then put in a bucket of water to die. And not as vivid as a picture, so it didn't take off on Weibo quite as much, but that was just another incident that we're starting to see more of because of Weibo. Like Yashua was talking about earlier, officials have quotas that they have to meet, and their promotions depend on that. So the central government, they say they don't want these things, but at the same time they want these quotas enforced, so kind of a blind eye is turned, and as long as the quotas are met, we won't ask too many questions. So you have to imagine that this 6-month law is broken quite often.
And the statements we have in the state media today say that the area where this particular abortion took place is having an investigation into the means that he used to enforce the one-child policy. Again, we'll have to find out what happens with those investigations. Junior in South Africa's just posted on our Facebook page, this one-child policy must stop, he says. And Marcos in New York, again posting on Facebook, this is an outrage. The Chinese have gone down the same road as Japan and could look forward to the same problems. Lots of you like to be online as you watch. We're on the hashtag WHYS. We're also on Facebook, and do keep the messages coming in. Now let's cross over to Jill McGivering, who's with the World Have Your Say team, which is taking all of your calls and looking through your messages as well. Hi Jill, what have you got?
Hi, calls just in as you came to me from Saudi Arabia and South Africa. And most people still expressing their horror about what happened to this woman, and of course a lot of condemnation of the people responsible. Mohammed in Liberia's comment was fairly typical. He said, this is a complete violation of human rights and it's totally unacceptable. Most of those getting in touch are also sounding quite sceptical about the way that China's reacted to this. Some are saying, look, suspending these officials just isn't tough enough. That's been described as nothing more than a smokescreen by some people to deflect international anger. And some are saying it's only because the Chinese authorities are embarrassed that they're taking action at all. So a lot of people wanting much tougher action from China.
Thank you very much indeed. Those of you watching, if you'd like to speak to Jill and the rest of the team in the World Have Your Say newsroom, the number's country code 44 2070 83 72 72. Thanks for joining me, Ros Atkins, here on World Have Your Say. We're talking about a picture which many of you have seen of a young Chinese woman in bed next to the corpse of a fetus her fetus, which was aborted during the 7th month of her pregnancy. That's some of the pictures. Some of you may have seen more of it online. That's how much we're able to show here on the BBC, because it's so graphic, and it's prompted condemnation by many, many people, but also a broader discussion about China's one-child policy and whether the furore about this picture may have an impact on it. Well, we've been speaking to Chai Ling from the group All Girls Allowed. Yeshui, a Chinese-American in Washington, D.C., has been speaking to us. Eric Fish, a blogger, an American in Beijing also. Let's bring in a fourth guest to talk this through. Professor Barbara Settles is from the Department of Human Development and Family Studies at the University of Delaware, and we appreciate your time today. We've already got into whether there are economic benefits to come with this one-child policy. What's your view of that?
Well, I think that the smaller families have definitely benefited, and particularly the one child, or in many cases the two children, because it wasn't always enforced everywhere equally, has meant that many more children are getting education, getting real careers, real work, and also that grandparents from both sides of the family are now involved with that child. I think it's important to recognize that 50 years ago, when this policy was started in China, it was really very much supported by the UN and the World Bank and the Club of Rome and many other demographers who were terribly worried about the direction that world population was going in. And they saw nothing wrong with a mandate at that time. What has happened, though, in the meantime, is that across the world, women, when they've got a little bit of money, some education, and access to contraception, have done this demographic transition without a mandate. And so we sit here and say, well, perhaps China is far behind in terms of really recognizing that women everywhere are limiting their families and doing it voluntarily. I do believe that the government in 2001 did put forth policy opposed to this kind of abortion. So when they say that it's not their policy,
Professor Settles, let me just invite Yeshui to respond to the point you made, that with smaller families, the children who are in those families receive more attention, there's more money available, and so forth. They benefit because of that. Yeshui, why don't you accept that?
Yes, in theory it is, but you have to consider that rural China is dirt poor. It's dirt poor. The reason most farmers in China want to have more children is precisely because they don't have social support, social security, and so they want more children to work in the field and to support their life when they're old. So that's to mend this this problem. There are a lot more than just whether it's better to have a smaller family. Yes, if the social security system is strong enough, and I think farmers will easily agree that, okay, I can just have a one or two, but that's not the case.
Yes, you're in Washington, D.C. Olatunji is in Lagos.
Yeah,
He's posted on facebook.com/World Have Your Say. The apology from the Chinese authorities is a charade intended to keep the West off their backs. It's in no way an indication of a major policy shift. And Professor Settles, do you think that there will be long-term consequences of this furore at the moment?
Well, I think there's lots of long-term consequences to the one-child policy that we will be needing to look at. For example, I don't know if you've previously discussed the fact that sex selection has often been a reason for abortion, not so much these late-term abortions, but earlier abortions.
Well, we haven't talked about that.
They have a big cohort right now of young men who are at the age that they might want to marry, who really don't, in fact, have many candidates. I would want to comment on what the young woman said about the rural areas. It is true, there is a tremendous difference between rural areas and urban areas, and the policy has always been less enforced in urban or in rural areas than in urban areas. And in fact, many times rural families want a girl because she may be able to go east and work in the factories and send back money. At one time, terribly favoring men, boys instead.
Professor Settles, thank you very much indeed. Now, for practical reasons that those of you watching can imagine, it's not particularly easy to get people to join us live from Beijing, though we appreciate Eric was able to do that for 10 minutes, and thank you to him for his time. We have, though, had BBC crews out in Beijing speaking to people on the streets. Beijing resident Ms. Dai gave us her reaction to this particular photo.
I don't think they should have done this. The baby was 7 months old, and as a woman, I know that if she was to deliver the baby now, it would survive. It's so horrible that they aborted her child.
Thank you very much to that woman. Chai Ling, let me bring you back in. You are clearly outraged by what has happened, but do you believe that what's happened this week, the reaction to this particular photo, will actually make any difference to the behavior and the actions of the Chinese authorities?
I believe God's time is here to end this brutal one-child policy that has lasted more than 30 years. Under this policy, this kind of cases happened over again. In 1983 alone, there were 14...
Chai Ling, I'm going to interrupt you straight away because I understand your outrage about this, but that's not what I'm asking you. I'm asking you why you believe this week, the events of this week, might have an impact, because lots of people are skeptical that it will.
Well, because we've been working for this issue for several years now, since 2009, and every day we get cases, reports, events. The picture I want to show you, which is on allgirlsallowed.org's website, there's so much information, cases after cases of women who was 8 months pregnant, 5 months pregnant, 6 months pregnant, was forced to abort their babies. And this is not a single incident. That's why this week, what happened with all these international media and the apology for the government is unprecedented.
Okay, well, you say it's unprecedented. I suppose what we need to see is whether the reaction of the Chinese government will also be unprecedented. I should say that the vast majority of you who are watching the BBC's World Have Your Say are as outraged about this photo as Chai Ling is. I suppose the second question I would ask you, though, is do you believe the furore will follow on with a change in policy, or at least a change in the way that this policy is enforced? You're very welcome to get in touch on Skype. BBC_WHYS is our address. I'm going to bring in someone in Saudi Arabia who's watching and has called us just that way. Khadija joins us live. Hi, Khadija. What's your point?
Hi. In my opinion, what happened with that woman is beyond awful. But the point is that one-child policy, it's not wrong at the policy. But there is a lot of people in China government use abuse this policy.
Okay, well, that's an interesting point. Let me bring that up with Yashway. What about the idea made by Khadija there in Saudi Arabia that the problem isn't the policy, it's just that at the moment it's being unfairly enforced?
Yes. I have been until very recently involved in the Chen Guangcheng campaign, the blind lawyer who got under house arrest and in prison for 7 years. And he got into trouble precisely because of the abortion issue. And I read his report, and we have to realize the underlying problems. One I already mentioned is the tie between officials' promotion and the family planning
And that
performance.
is an interesting idea, one which I would like to explore more, but we're very, very short of time. But Yashway, thank you very much indeed. Professor Settles and Chai Ling as well. And Khadija, thank you for calling us from Saudi Arabia. We'll be back in a couple of moments' time. Hi, Ross Atkins. On today's World Have Your Say, we've already heard your reaction to that picture of a young woman lying next to the corpse of a fetus that had been aborted 7 months into her pregnancy, and you're still talking about that on facebook.com/worldhaveyoursay. Well, that's going on online here on the television for the next half an hour. We're going to turn our attention to that text message from the Spanish Prime Minister to his Finance Minister. Lots of you have seen this. With the number 4 power in Europe, Spain is not Uganda, he wrote. Now, on one level, he is undoubtedly right. But is it as offensive as some of you have found it, or just a reasonable statement of fact? We're on Twitter, Facebook, Google+, text, the phone and email. We're also live, and you're very welcome to take part. Now, we're not sure of an exact figure, but we think Spain's going to be receiving an estimated $125 billion of assistance from the Eurozone. And just before that deal, the Prime Minister sent this text saying Spain is not Uganda. Well, I'll show you the full text of the text in a moment. Actually, let's put it up on the screen right now so we can see exactly what he had to say. There you go. Well, let's talk to 3 guests about this. Ida Horner is a community development consultant in London. Margarita's joining us from Spain. She doesn't want to tell us where in Spain, but that's fine. She's welcome on the programme. And Juan is an engineer in Alicante in Spain. All 3 of you, you're very, very welcome to the programme. Well, Juan, let me start with you. Did your Prime Minister get this wrong?
Well, if I had to give my opinion on this, I want to make very clear that I'm not supportive with the current sort of approach the Spanish government is having with the whole big European issue. To be fair, looking at the comments, it really looks as if I don't know, the comments are for saying the least high-handed, or rather a bit arrogant, really. However, I must say that I think things have been taken a bit out of perspective. I don't think in Spain there is any negative approach towards Africa, and even less Uganda. And perhaps, maybe if we can, on the Prime Minister's benefit, the Spanish President's benefit, maybe we can say it's just a matter of ignorance, maybe. But yeah. Rather perplexing comment, considering we are on a 24% unemployment, a negative growth, where Uganda at the moment is doing substantially better.
Well, Ida, perplexing is the word used there by one of our guests, but other people have been using far stronger words. How would you describe this text message?
To me, the text message really smacks of neo-colonial attitudes that some European leaders may still have about African countries, because ultimately they've been working at democracy and governance for much longer than we are. And countries like Spain still receive structural funds, which is a form of aid. So in fact, I think that text message was really misguided, and it would be worthwhile if it could perhaps issue an apology.
Okay, well, there's no apology so far. Margarita in Spain, should your Prime Minister apologise?
I don't think he has, actually. It's just a bit shameful that he made that comment, and especially considering that here in Spain, sometimes we have complained about the fact that we've been looked down upon. He just hasn't showed to have a lot of political correctness, and that's not right for someone in his position, I think.
But, I mean, all 3 of you, and Ida, perhaps you can respond to this. Isn't it just simply a statement of fact? Clearly, Spain isn't Uganda. It's beyond dispute that Uganda takes a great deal of assistance from other countries, and all he was saying is, I don't think Spain should take that kind of help. Is that really so bad?
The thing, it is true that...
sorry, Karen.
Ida, why don't you go ahead, and then Margarita, you can reply.
Okay, whilst there is some truth in what he said, but I think it's the spirit in which that message was put out there. Because ultimately, you know, a country like Uganda depends on tourism. And if we hear, you know, so some people in Spain and perhaps others in Europe, the only experience of Africa is on television. We had the Joseph Kony video going out. On the back of that, we have a European Prime Minister describing the country as a banana republic. Now, who in their right mind would want to pack their bags and go and experience a country that's been described as being at war and being a banana republic?
Well, fine, but the Prime Minister didn't call Uganda a banana republic. All he did was make a comparison where he clearly meant that Uganda takes a great deal of assistance and he didn't want Spain to.
Regardless, because at the end of the day, he could have used a different analogy or just to put his point at home that, you know, we do need assistance. You know, we're not perhaps in a very bad situation. By the way, I think they actually are, if they do need the assistance, and they have needed assistance since they joined the European Union. So the question in my mind is, why have they not managed their affairs that well to get to a situation where they're in right now?
And those of you watching, you might be interested to know that the so-called Troika, the three bodies which will be overseeing this Eurozone loan to Spain, are the European Commission, the European Central Bank, and then the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, which of course has extensive involvement in sub-Saharan Africa. Well, let's pull up a message on our Facebook page. Facebook.com/World Have Your Say is where lots of you are posting. Richard's in Uganda. Indeed, Spain is no Uganda. Spain is broke. Uganda is not. Uganda has lovely weather all round. Spain doesn't. Well, we could debate that. And Uganda is the pearl of Africa. Well, he makes a number of points there. Juan, let's leave the maybe leave the weather out of it. But when it comes to debt, do you think now that Spain and other European countries have to accept you can't feel superior to poorer countries in a way that maybe you once did?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that the current situation with Spain, especially financially, structurally, as far as we're managing like our budget, is critical and extremely challenging. So I think it's rather derogatory and fairly condescending of the Spanish Prime Minister to refer to Uganda using one of these one of the generalizations of all time, because they are in Africa, they basically just surviving or living on us. I think things are a bit out of context. Going back to your question, should he apologize? I think he should. Even if it's a bit out of context, still they are international, they represent us internationally, and from a public relations point of view, I think it wouldn't take a lot of effort, and it would certainly be an absolute gesture on his side to come up publicly and just say, hey, this was just a comment, it was taken out of context, and we are in no place to patronize Uganda right now, to be honest.
And even though the Prime Minister did accept this rescue package after he sent this text message, the Spanish government has consistently said this isn't a rescue, this isn't a bailout, it's just a loan. And if you're watching thinking, well, what exactly is the difference between what Spain is getting and what Greece is getting? Well, it's complicated, but to put it very simply, there are an awful lot of strings attached to the Greece bailout, and we've been hearing that play out during the Greek election campaign that's coming to a head this weekend. While as with Spain, there are some strings, but they are far less stringent. In fact, we don't even know exactly what those strings will be. If you want a full rundown of all of that, bbc.com/news. Margarita, let me bring you back in. I just wonder if this text message highlights the fact that accepting this loan, if we want to call it that, is a real blow to Spanish pride, and your Prime Minister was feeling that pressure.
Well, perhaps he was feeling that pressure, but I don't think that Spanish people feel that their pride has been damaged at all. In fact, we Spanish people know better than anybody, and I'm sure that Juan probably agrees with me, that partially we are in the situation we are now because there are far too many people around who are too willing to take advantage of anything at any time, steal from anybody. We've got politicians here who are voting themselves some like exaggerated wages for life, and everyone is taking advantage of anything they can, and that's partially, I think, why we're in this situation. You know, so I'm not sure we should. At least my pride is not being affected by it.
Okay.
In fact, I feel quite angry at the fact that sometimes Spanish people can be a bit like that, actually.
Okay. Ida, maybe it's time to say Uganda is not Spain.
Uganda isn't Spain, but ultimately the world as it stands at the moment, it's all about globalization. Uganda at some point, I don't have the recent figures right now, but in 2002, for instance, exports out of Uganda into Spain accounted for 12% of Uganda's exports. And really, it's all about trade and how we can relate to each other. Uganda has a lot of raw materials that Spain and other European countries need. And therefore, maintaining those relationships on grounds of respect and mutual gain, I think is paramount. And text messages such as the one from the Prime Minister doesn't help that situation at all.
All right, we'll leave it there for the moment. Ida, Margarita and Juan, thank you very much indeed. If you're watching, it's not too late for you to get involved. You can Skype us, BBC_WHYS. Do you think the Spanish Prime Minister was out of line when he said that Spain is not Uganda? We're back in a couple of minutes' time. Hi, I'm Ross Atkins. Thanks for staying with us here on the BBC's World Have Your Say. We're talking about that text message which the Spanish Prime Minister sent to his Finance Minister, where he said we can't take a bailout. We're the fourth biggest economy in Europe. Spain is no Uganda, he wrote, and that's prompted a huge reaction over the last couple of days. And as we're talking about Uganda, I must mention that we're very, very excited here on the BBC because from Monday next week, we're going to be bringing you a completely new programme with Komla Dumor. Focus on Africa is live at 17:30 GMT, Monday to Friday here on BBC World News with Komla, bringing you comprehensive coverage of the day's main news from the continent. So do join Komla live on BBC World News, 17:30 GMT on Monday, and then from then on, every single weekday. Now let's switch across to the World Have Your Say newsroom and bring in Jill, who's still with the team, looking across all the calls that are coming in.
Yes, and calls just in the last couple of minutes from Iran and Nigeria. A lot of this discussion dominated by people calling in from Uganda or from people who are sympathetic to Uganda, who are being quite feisty in response to all this. Basically variations on the theme of people saying, no, Uganda is not Spain, of course it's not, thank goodness it's not. Some people having quite a bit of fun with the debate, but equally some who sound actually genuinely very offended. Kisake in Uganda says, we all know that Uganda is not Spain in many aspects, that's an indisputable fact, but it's the context in which this was said that makes it an insult to the Ugandan people and to Africa in general. Some others, though, trying to be a little bit more soothing. A typical comment is that the Spanish Prime Minister didn't intend to cause offence by that text message. Charles says, I don't believe there was any intention to insult anyone. The Spanish PM's statement should be taken at face value. People shouldn't try to impute any negative motives.
Jill, thank you very much indeed. It has to be said that certainly some of you watching in Africa are rather enjoying the differences between Uganda and Spain. Saidu says, of course Spain isn't Uganda. The Prime Minister didn't get it wrong. Spain is a debt-ridden country that needs a bailout. Uganda doesn't need one at all. And after that weather exchange just now, Jesse has just tweeted to say, Spain's definitely got better beaches. Well, I think you're in a slightly better geographical position in Spain to have better beaches than Uganda. Thank you very much for all of those messages. Now, let's switch to Kampala and bring in Linda, who's a PR executive there. She's on the phone. Hi, Linda. Were you offended by the Spanish Prime Minister?
Hi. Yes, I was. I felt very offended. First of all, because the comparison itself was politically incorrect. It came off as very condescending and arrogant, which should not be characteristic of any leader, especially of a developed nation. He came off as looking down on us, which he probably didn't intend to, but the mere fact that he said that, we all have to take it the way he said it. We can all define it the way we want, but for us in Uganda right now, it comes off as a very arrogant and condescending remark, which he should not have made.
Linda, good to speak to you. I'm going to jump in there just because I want to get Ida's response to what you're saying. Ida, I'm listening to Linda there and I'm thinking, but hold on, it's an established fact that Uganda takes millions and millions of dollars of assistance. What is wrong with a Prime Minister of another country saying we don't want to be like that?
Well, ultimately, from my point of view, the European Union is a very important trading partner of Uganda. And in terms of aid and trade and all of that is appreciated. But ultimately, the European Union per se doesn't head out there to patronize Uganda in a way, or any other African countries, in a way that the Prime Minister's text message made out to be. Yes, by all means, Uganda is a poor country compared to Spain. It's probably not governed as well as Spain is. But ultimately, I think those comments were really out of order.
Thank you very much indeed, Ida. This is from the diary of Mzungu in Uganda, who's tweeted us, since 2008, the average growth of Spain is minus 2.5%. Uganda plus 17%. Rajoy is right, that's the Prime Minister. Spain is not Uganda. Margarita, these are tough times for your Prime Minister. Do you think he's getting it right, though?
No. I don't think he's getting it right at all. No, definitely not.
Tell me quickly what thing he should do that he's not doing at the moment, then.
Well, the kind of reforms that he's done at the moment, but the only thing they've done is not to save the economy, but all those people who, like me, work for somebody, all those people who don't own a company, have been kind of almost exploited. Like at the moment, the reform forces us to accept any condition for work, and people are grateful to work a lot of hours every day and get paid perhaps 600, 900 euros a month.
Okay.
The standard of living hasn't decreased. Health is worse.
Margarita, this is a long list. I was asking for one thing. You're giving me a comprehensive policy overhaul, but it's been good fun speaking with you and Juan and Ida. Thanks to all of you who've got in touch. We've had lots and lots of messages. I'll speak to you next week. Goodbye.